Blood trickled down Jamal's face as flight attendant Nancy smirked, watching security drag him from first class. His phone buzzed. Dad texting, "Stay put. Arriving in 10. Little did the crew know, Jamal's father wasn't just any passenger's parent. He owned the entire airline. Before we dive into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever experienced or witnessed discrimination while traveling. The events you're about to hear will make you question everything about how we treat each other in public spaces. Are you ready to see how quickly justice can arrive when you mess with the wrong family? The morning had started like a dream for 17-year-old Jamal Washington. He stood in his bedroom, staring in disbelief at the first-class ticket to San Francisco in his hands. Stanford University, his dream school, awaited him for a special campus tour reserved for exceptional candidates. After years of perfect grades, coding competitions, and sleepless nights studying, this trip represented everything he had worked for. "You earned this," his father Devin had told him, handing over the envelope containing the ticket. "First class all the way for my first-class son." What Jamal didn't know was that his father wasn't just the successful businessman he portrayed himself to be. Devin Washington was actually the CEO and majority shareholder of Liberty Atlantic Airlines. The very airline Jamal would be flying. Devin had intentionally kept this information from his son, wanting Jamal to grow up understanding the value of hard work rather than privilege. Only a select group of executives knew the CEO's family details, and Devin preferred it that way. "Call me when you land," Devin said, hugging his son goodbye at their Atlanta home. "And remember what I always tell you." Jamal nodded, reciting his father's familiar advice. "Keep your head high, stay calm, and let your excellence speak for itself." He needed that advice more than he knew. At the airport, Jamal approached the check-in counter wearing comfortable travel clothes, jeans, sneakers, and his favorite navy hoodie with the NASA logo. The white check-in agent, a woman in her 50s named Barbara, looked at his first-class ticket with suspicion. "ID please," she requested, her tone clipped. After examining his driver's license, she asked, "Do you have any additional identification?" Jamal provided his school ID, maintaining his politeness. Through the corner of his eye, he noticed a white businessman in a rumpled suit sail through the adjacent first-class line with barely a glance at his documentation. "Is there a problem with my ticket?" Jamal finally asked after Barbara spent an unusual amount of time verifying his information. "Just being thorough," she replied without making eye contact. "We need to make sure everyone is where they're supposed to be." The emphasis on "supposed to be" wasn't lost on Jamal. He'd experienced this kind of subtle questioning of his belonging throughout his life. As the only black student in his AP calculus class, he'd endured plenty of surprised looks when he aced exams. As captain of the robotics team, he'd faced doubts about his leadership abilities despite his technical brilliance. Before heading to security, Jamal called his father one last time. "Everything okay?" Devin asked, detecting something in his son's voice. "Yeah, just the usual," Jamal said, keeping his tone light. "Nothing I can't handle." Devin sighed. As a black man who had climbed to the pinnacle of corporate America, he understood exactly what "the usual" meant. "Remember who you are, son. You belong in first class just as much as anyone else. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise." After hanging up, Jamal made his way through security, where his carry-on was randomly selected for additional screening. 3 white teenagers ahead of him passed through without any extra checks. Jamal remained silent, knowing from experience that pointing out such discrepancies rarely helped. His academic achievements spoke for themselves: perfect SAT scores, published research in a youth science journal, creator of an app that helped colorblind people identify colors in real time. At 17, Jamal had already accomplished more than many adults. Yet here he was, repeatedly having to prove he belonged in spaces his intellect had earned him access to. As he approached the gate, Jamal felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. This was his first time flying first class, and while he looked forward to the experience, the check-in interaction had reminded him that luxury spaces weren't always welcoming to people who looked like him. "I belong here," he whispered to himself as the gate agent called for first-class boarding. "I belong here." When the boarding announcement came for first-class passengers, Jamal joined the short line, boarding pass and ID in hand. The gate agent, a young white woman named Kelly, did a double-take when she saw him approach. "First class is boarding now," she emphasized, as if Jamal had misunderstood. "Yes, I know," he replied, handing her his documents. "I'm in seat 3A. Kelly examined his boarding pass longer than necessary before reluctantly scanning it. The machine beeped green, confirming his first-class status. With a tight smile, she returned his documents. "Enjoy your flight," she said, her tone suggesting she didn't expect him to. Jamal walked down the jet bridge, determined to enjoy this experience his father had gifted him. As he entered the aircraft, flight attendant Nancy Miller greeted passengers with a practiced smile that vanished when her eyes landed on him. "First class is to the left," Nancy said, her voice dropping to a near whisper as she leaned closer. "Are you sure you're in the right cabin?" Jamal showed her his boarding pass. "Seat 3A, he confirmed, maintaining the polite tone his parents had instilled in him. Nancy's eyes narrowed as she verified his information. Unlike with the white passengers before him, she didn't offer to help with his backpack or direct him to his seat. Instead, she watched him closely as he made his way down the aisle. First class was half full when Jamal located his window seat. As he settled in, he noticed an elderly white couple, the Hendersons, in the row across from him visibly tensing. Mrs. Henderson clutched her handbag closer to her chest, while Mr. Henderson subtly moved their personal items away from Jamal's side of the aisle. 2 rows ahead, a white man in his 40s turned to stare at Jamal before muttering something to his seatmate. Jamal heard him clearly. "Seems like standards are dropping these days." Taking a deep breath, Jamal focused on the positive. He was heading to Stanford. This was a milestone moment. He took out his phone and snapped a photo of the spacious seat and the welcome drink menu, planning to share the experience with his friends later. "Excuse me," Nancy appeared beside him. "Can I see your boarding pass again?" Jamal complied, though he had already shown it twice. "Is something wrong?" "Just routine," Nancy replied, though Jamal noticed she hadn't asked to see anyone else's boarding pass a second time. She scrutinized the document before reluctantly handing it back. As more passengers boarded, a young Asian man in his late 20s took the aisle seat in Jamal's row. He smiled warmly. "First time in first class?" he asked. "Is it that obvious?" Jamal replied with a small laugh. "I was the same way my first time," the man said, extending his hand. "Michael Chen." "Jamal Washington." Michael's eyes widened in recognition. "Wait, Jamal Washington? The creator of Color Sense? I was a judge at the National Youth Tech Competition last year. Your app was brilliant." For the first time since arriving at the airport, Jamal felt truly seen. "You remember that?" "Of course. It was the most innovative entry by far. I've been following your updates. The new feature for identifying patterns is genius." As they continued discussing technology, Jamal noticed Nancy watching their interaction with suspicion. She whispered something to the cabin manager, Thomas Peterson, a tall white man with a receding hairline, who had just emerged from the cockpit. Thomas approached their row, addressing only Michael. "Everything all right here, sir?" "Yes, everything's great," Michael replied, looking confused by the question. "We were just talking about technology." Thomas nodded but lingered, his gaze fixed on Jamal. "Let me know if you need anything," he said to Michael before walking away. The interaction reminded Jamal of countless similar experiences at his predominantly white high school. Like when security would question him, and only him, when he stayed late to use the computer lab. Or when a teacher accused him of cheating because his essay was too well written. Or when parents at science fairs would ask if he was really the creator of his award-winning projects. As the final first-class passengers boarded, Jamal overheard Nancy speaking to Thomas in the galley. "I don't know how he got in here, but he doesn't belong," she whispered, not quite quietly enough. "I'll be watching him." Michael caught Jamal's eye, clearly having heard the comment too. He shook his head slightly in disgust. "Some people never change," Michael muttered. "Don't let them get to you." Jamal nodded, but the excitement of his first-class experience had already begun to sour. What should have been a moment of pride had become yet another space where he had to justify his presence. As the economy passengers filed past toward the back of the plane, Jamal noticed several curious glances directed his way. The first-class cabin was now full, and flight attendants were preparing for departure. The white businessman Jamal had mentally nicknamed Mr. Standards was Brandon Caldwell, according to the overly friendly way Nancy addressed him when offering a pre-departure drink. "Mr. Caldwell, would you like champagne or orange juice this morning?" Nancy asked, her customer service smile firmly in place. "Champagne, please, Nancy," Brandon replied, seemingly a frequent flyer recognized by the crew. Nancy moved efficiently through the cabin, offering drinks to each passenger. When she reached Michael, her smile remained professional. "Something to drink before takeoff, sir." "Just water, please," Michael replied. Nancy nodded and turned to leave without acknowledging Jamal. "Excuse me," Jamal called politely. "Could I have some orange juice, please?" Nancy paused, her back stiffening before she turned around. "I'll come back," she said curtly. She proceeded to serve everyone else in first class, returning to the galley to prepare the drink cart. 5 minutes passed, and while everyone else sipped their beverages, Jamal's tray table remained empty. When Nancy passed by again, Jamal raised his hand slightly. "I'm sorry, but I think you forgot my orange juice." Nancy's expression hardened. "I'm quite busy at the moment. I'll have to ask you not to give me attitude." "I wasn't giving attitude," Jamal replied, keeping his voice level. "I just wanted to remind you about my drink." From across the aisle, Brandon Caldwell snorted. "Some people need to learn their place," he said, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Michael leaned forward. "The young man just asked for a drink like everyone else received. What's the problem?" Nancy ignored Michael's question, her attention focused on Jamal. "Sir, if you continue to be disruptive, we'll have issues." "Disruptive?" Jamal asked, genuinely confused. "I only asked for orange juice." The confrontation was escalating beyond anything Jamal had anticipated. He noticed Thomas, the cabin manager, observing from the galley. After a brief whispered conversation with Nancy, Thomas approached, accompanied by a uniformed security officer who had been standing near the cockpit door. "Sir," Thomas addressed Jamal formally, "we've received reports of disruptive behavior." "What reports?" Jamal asked. "I've been sitting here quietly except for asking for a drink." "We also have reason to believe you may not be in your assigned cabin," Thomas continued as if Jamal hadn't spoken. "I've shown my boarding pass 3 times already." Jamal reached for his phone where he had stored his digital boarding pass. The security officer, whose name tag read James Wilson, moved closer, hand hovering near his belt. "Sir, please keep your hands where I can see them." What would normally be a simple misunderstanding was rapidly transforming into something more dangerous. Jamal felt his heart racing but remembered his father's words about staying calm. "My boarding pass is on my phone," Jamal explained slowly. "I'm just trying to show you that I'm in the correct seat." "We've had reports from multiple passengers," Thomas insisted, though he didn't specify which passengers or what they had reported. Brandon Caldwell spoke up again. "I saw him arguing with the flight attendant. Very aggressive." Mrs. Henderson nodded in agreement. "I don't feel safe with him here." Michael stood up. "That's absolutely false. He's been nothing but polite. I've been sitting right next to him." Thomas turned to Michael. "Sir, please stay out of this or we'll have you removed as well." The security officer moved closer to Jamal. "I need you to come with me, now." "This is ridiculous," Jamal protested, his voice rising slightly with frustration. "I have a valid ticket for this seat." "Do not raise your voice," Officer Wilson warned, reaching for Jamal's arm. "Don't touch me," Jamal said, instinctively pulling away. "I haven't done anything wrong." That small defensive movement was all the justification Wilson needed. He grabbed Jamal roughly by the shoulder. "You're coming with me now." "What do you think about how quickly this situation escalated?" Comment number 1 if you believe Jamal should have continued trying to show his boarding pass, or comment number 2 if you think he should have quietly left to avoid further confrontation. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you've ever witnessed unfair treatment based on someone's appearance. What would you have done in Michael's position as the only passenger speaking up for Jamal? Let's see how this tense situation continues to unfold. Security Officer Wilson's grip tightened painfully around Jamal's upper arm. "Stand up now," he ordered, his voice carrying through the suddenly silent first-class cabin. "You're hurting me," Jamal said, wincing as he tried to comply. The awkward angle made it difficult to rise from the window seat with Wilson pulling him. "Stop resisting," Wilson barked, though Jamal was simply trying to stand as instructed. Michael attempted to intervene again. "This is completely unnecessary." "He's not resisting." Nancy stepped forward. "Sir, remain in your seat or you'll be removed as well." As Jamal finally managed to stand, Wilson yanked him forward with excessive force, causing Jamal to stumble into the aisle. His navy hoodie caught on the armrest, ripping audibly at the seam. "My hoodie!" Jamal exclaimed. "Shut up and move," Wilson growled, shoving Jamal forward. The momentum sent Jamal off balance. He tried to catch himself on a seat back but missed, his forehead smacking against the sharp edge of an extended tray table. Pain exploded across his brow, and he felt immediate warmth as blood began trickling down his face. Gasps echoed through the cabin. Several passengers had their phones out, recording the escalating violence. One woman in business attire covered her mouth in horror. "You're bleeding him!" Michael shouted, standing again despite the warnings. "This is assault." Jamal raised his hand to his forehead, his fingers coming away red with blood. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice shaking not with fear but with dawning anger. "I have a legitimate ticket." Nancy stepped back into the galley, but not before Jamal caught the satisfied smirk that briefly crossed her face. "They all say that," she remarked to Thomas. Wilson pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and roughly pressed it against Jamal's head. "Let's go," he commanded, pulling Jamal down the aisle. Mrs. Henderson suddenly raised her voice. "He was making threatening gestures before you came." "I saw him." "That's a complete lie." Michael protested, now recording the incident himself. "I've been sitting next to him the entire time." Officer Wilson turned to Michael. "Sir, this is your final warning. Sit down or you're next." As Jamal was dragged through first class toward the economy section, every passenger could see the blood now staining the white handkerchief pressed against his forehead. Economy passengers craned their necks to watch the commotion, many looking shocked at the sight of a bleeding teenager being forcibly removed. "I have rights," Jamal called out, trying to maintain his dignity despite the humiliation burning through him. "Check my ticket. Call my father." "Keep moving," Wilson insisted, his grip bruising Jamal's arm. As they approached the exit, Jamal managed to free his hand enough to reach into his pocket. With trembling fingers, he grasped his phone and quickly typed a text to his father, "Dad, emergency. Being dragged off plane. Bleeding. Help." He attached one of the photos another passenger had taken of him being restrained, clearly showing the blood on his face. Just as they reached the door, he hit send. Wilson noticed the phone. "Give me that," he demanded, reaching for it. No, Jamal clutched the device tightly. It was his only lifeline now. The officer tried to pry it from his hand, but Jamal's desperation gave him strength. In the struggle, Jamal was shoved against the exit door frame, adding another bruise to his growing collection. "That's enough." A male voice called from economy. "You're using excessive force on a kid." Wilson ignored the comment, finally managing to march Jamal off the plane and onto the jet bridge. 2 more airport security officers waited there, looking surprised at Jamal's bloodied appearance. "What happened to him?" one asked. Resisting removal, Wilson replied curtly. "He got physical." "That's not true." Jamal protested. "I was just sitting in my assigned seat." The new officers exchanged uncertain glances but took Jamal by the arms anyway, escorting him through the terminal as curious onlookers stared. Blood continued to drip down his face, his torn hoodie hanging awkwardly off one shoulder. Jamal felt the vibration of his phone in his pocket. His father had responded, "Stay put. Arriving in 10. What Jamal didn't know was that those 7 words were about to change everything. In the downtown Atlanta headquarters of Liberty Atlantic Airlines, CEO Devin Washington sat at the head of a polished mahogany table, surrounded by executives discussing quarterly projections. As one of the few black CEOs of a major airline, Devin had built his reputation on exceptional leadership and transforming the once struggling company into an industry leader. His phone vibrated in his pocket, once, twice, 3 times. Normally, Devin never checked his phone during board meetings, but something about the repeated notifications concerned him. His son should have been safely on his way to San Francisco by now. "Excuse me for a moment," he said to the room of executives before glancing at his screen. The blood drained from his face as he stared at the image of his son, his brilliant, gentle son, with blood streaming down his face, being manhandled by security. The text accompanying the photo made his stomach clench. "Meeting's over," Devin announced abruptly, standing so quickly his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "But sir, we haven't discussed the Asian market expansion," began the chief financial officer, Roger Thompson. "I said the meeting is over," Devin repeated, his voice deadly calm despite the rage building inside him. "My son is being assaulted on one of our planes." The room fell silent as executives exchanged worried glances. "Which flight?" asked Linda Patterson, the chief operations officer, already reaching for her tablet. "Flight 1422 to San Francisco," Devin replied, pocketing his phone. "I need my helicopter ready in 5 minutes. And get me the captain of that flight immediately." As executives scrambled to action, Devin strode to his private office, calling his head of security. "Alan, meet me on the helipad. My son has been assaulted on one of our flights. I want our entire legal team at the airport when I arrive." Within minutes, Devin was in the company helicopter, soaring over Atlanta traffic toward Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. He called Jamal again but got no answer. "Try the airport security office," he instructed his assistant via the helicopter's communication system. "Find out where they're holding him." Meanwhile, Jamal sat in a small, windowless room in the airport security office. His requests for medical attention for his still bleeding head had been ignored. His attempts to explain that he was a legitimate first-class passenger had been dismissed. "We have reports from multiple crew members and passengers that you were disruptive and potentially dangerous," said a security supervisor named Kevin Reeves. "That's all we need to know." "But that's not what happened," Jamal insisted, wincing at the throbbing pain in his forehead. "I was just sitting in my assigned seat. I did nothing wrong." "Sure, kid," Reeves replied dismissively. "Everyone's innocent." The door opened, and a nervous-looking junior security officer entered. "Sir," he addressed Reeves, "there's something you should know. Operations just called. They're getting high-priority calls about this passenger." Reeves frowned. "What kind of calls?" Before the junior officer could answer, the door burst open again. A woman in an airport management suit entered, her face pale. Release him immediately, she ordered. And get medical assistance here now. On what grounds? Reeves demanded. The woman's voice shook slightly. That's Jamal Washington. His father is Devin Washington. Am I supposed to know who that is? Reeves crossed his arms defiantly. The CEO of Liberty Atlantic Airlines, she hissed. Our largest carrier. And he's landing on our executive helipad right now with the company's legal team. The color drained from Reeves' face. The CEO. But. Move, she commanded, already pulling out her phone to call for medical assistance. Back on flight 1422, the passengers were growing restless. They had been fully boarded for nearly 20 minutes with no sign of departure. Nancy and Thomas whispered urgently in the galley, occasionally casting nervous glances toward the cockpit. The captain's voice suddenly came over the intercom. "Ah, this is your captain speaking. We've been instructed to return to the gate. We apologize for the delay." Groans erupted throughout the cabin. What's happening? Brandon Caldwell demanded of Nancy as she passed his seat. A minor technical issue, she assured him with a strained smile. Michael Chen, still in his seat despite the earlier threats to remove him, knew better. He had been texting with colleagues who worked at the airport. Word was spreading rapidly about a major incident involving the CEO. "You might want to delete those videos you took of the young man being removed," Michael overheard Brandon telling Mrs. Henderson. "Just to be safe." "Why would I do that?" she replied, though she was already opening her photo gallery. "We didn't do anything wrong." In the security office, a paramedic was now attending to Jamal's forehead wound, cleaning away the dried blood and applying butterfly bandages. "You'll need stitches," the paramedic informed him. "But this will hold for now." The door slammed open, and Jamal looked up to see his father standing there, his normally composed demeanor fractured by barely contained fury. Behind him stood a team of suits, executives and lawyers from Liberty Atlantic. "Dad!" Jamal called, relief washing over him. Devin crossed the room in 3 long strides, carefully embracing his son while avoiding the fresh bandage. "What did they do to you?" he asked, his voice tight. "I was just sitting in my seat," Jamal began, his composure finally breaking. "They wouldn't even let me show my ticket. They said I didn't belong there." Devin turned to the security personnel, who seemed to be trying to disappear into the walls. "Every person involved in this will be held accountable," he stated with deadly precision. "Starting with the flight crew." He turned to Linda Patterson, who had arrived with him. "I want that plane held at the gate. No one leaves. And find me every passenger who witnessed what happened to my son." Within minutes, the airport was buzzing with activity as Liberty Atlantic executives took control of the situation. Security footage was being pulled, statements were being collected, and a path was being cleared for Devin and Jamal to return to the gate. "Why didn't you tell me you owned the airline?" Jamal asked quietly as they walked. Devin squeezed his son's shoulder. "I wanted you to experience the world without the shadow of my position. I wanted you to be known for your own brilliance, not as the CEO's son." He paused. "I never imagined it would leave you vulnerable like this." "It's not your fault," Jamal assured him, though the emotional and physical pain still radiated through him. "No," Devin agreed, his expression hardening as they approached the gate where Flight 1422 waited. "It's not. But I know exactly whose fault it is." The atmosphere in the Liberty Atlantic terminal crackled with tension as Devin Washington strode toward Gate 37, his son at his side, surrounded by a phalanx of company executives and legal representatives. Airport staff scrambled out of their path, whispers following in their wake. "That's him, the CEO. Is that his son? What happened to his face? Someone's getting fired today." Devin's reputation preceded him. Known for his brilliance in business and his zero-tolerance policy for incompetence, he had transformed Liberty Atlantic from a struggling regional carrier into a major player in the industry. He was respected, admired, and, when crossed, feared. Today, that fear was justified. As they approached the gate, Jamal noticed the gathering crowd. News of the incident had spread through the airport like wildfire. Passengers from other flights had their phones out, recording the CEO's procession. Among them, Jamal recognized several people from his flight who must have deplaned during the delay. Mr. Washington, called the airport director, hurrying to catch up with them. "We want to express our deepest apologies for this unfortunate incident." Devin didn't slow his pace. "Save your apologies. I want action." At the gate desk, the agent's eyes widened in recognition as the CEO approached. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for the intercom. "I'll need to board immediately," Devin stated, his tone brooking no argument. "Of course, sir," she replied, hurriedly preparing the jet bridge for re-entry. On the plane, word had already reached the flight crew. Through the open cockpit door, the captain could be seen engaged in an urgent phone conversation. Nancy and Thomas stood in the galley, their faces ashen as they whispered frantically. "What's happening?" Brandon Caldwell demanded, approaching the galley. "We've been sitting here for half an hour." Nancy forced a professional smile. "Just a minor situation, sir. We should be departing soon." "That's not what I heard," Michael Chen called from his seat. "I heard the CEO is coming aboard because you assaulted his son." The cabin fell silent as all eyes turned to Michael, then to the suddenly pale flight attendants. That's absurd," Thomas stammered. "There must be some misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding," Michael replied, holding up his phone. "I have the whole thing on video. As do several other passengers." Mrs. Henderson clutched her husband's arm. "We should tell them what really happened," she whispered urgently. "That boy was being aggressive." "Quiet, Margaret," Mr. Henderson hissed. "Let me handle this." Brandon Caldwell retreated to his seat, discreetly opening his laptop and appearing suddenly engrossed in work documents. The cabin door reopened, and Thomas visibly flinched as Devin Washington entered, followed by Jamal and several executives in business attire. The bandage on Jamal's forehead stood in stark contrast to his dark skin, the surrounding area still visibly bruised. A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. Several passengers who had witnessed Jamal's removal looked away in shame. Devin surveyed the cabin slowly, his gaze finally settling on Thomas and Nancy. "I'm Devin Washington, CEO of Liberty Atlantic Airlines," he announced, his voice carrying effortlessly through the cabin. "And this is my son, Jamal." Nancy's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. Thomas stepped forward, his professional training kicking in despite his obvious terror. "Mr. Washington, sir, there's been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Devin interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. "My son was physically assaulted, bloodied, and humiliated on my airline because of a misunderstanding." The silence in the cabin was absolute. Every passenger sat frozen, witnessing corporate accountability in its rawest form. "Sir," Nancy finally found her voice, "we were responding to passenger complaints about disruptive behavior." "Which passengers?" Devin demanded. Nancy's eyes flickered briefly toward Brandon and the Hendersons. Michael stood from his seat. "Sir, I was seated next to your son the entire time. He did absolutely nothing wrong. I tried to tell them, but they threatened to remove me too." "And you are?" Devin asked. "Michael Chen, CEO of Tech Fusion." Devin nodded in recognition of the well-known tech company. "Would you be willing to provide a statement about what you witnessed?" "Absolutely," Michael confirmed. "I recorded most of it too." He held up his phone. "Your son was perfectly polite. They refused to serve him a drink, accused him of having an attitude when he simply reminded them, and then claimed he was being disruptive." Other passengers began speaking up. "I saw it too," called a woman in business attire from row 5. The young man didn't do anything wrong. The security officer was unnecessarily rough, added a man near the back of first class. I have it on video as well. Devon turned back to the flight crew. I want to see those videos. All of them. Now. As passengers began forwarding their recordings to an executive's tablet, Brandon Caldwell stood abruptly. I have an important connection to make. I need to deplane immediately. Sit down, Mr. Caldwell, Devon commanded without looking at him. No one is going anywhere. Brandon sank back into his seat, his face flushing. One of the executives approached Devon with the tablet, now displaying one of the videos. The footage clearly showed Jamal being roughly handled by Officer Wilson, blood appearing on his forehead after the impact with the tray table. Devon's jaw tightened as he watched. Then, he looked directly at Mrs. Henderson. I understand you claimed my son was making threatening gestures. Would you care to point out where in this video that occurred? Mrs. Henderson's face paled. Well, it was before the recording started. That's a lie, Michael interjected. I was next to him the entire time. He was perfectly calm until they started manhandling him. The evidence was mounting, damning and irrefutable. Nancy and Thomas stood rigid, their careers visibly crumbling before their eyes. Devon addressed the entire cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize sincerely for the delay. Every passenger will receive a full refund for this flight and vouchers for future travel. We pride ourselves on our service at Liberty Atlantic, and what happened today falls catastrophically short of our standards. He turned to Linda Patterson. I want this entire crew removed and replaced immediately. Call in reserves. Already done, Linda confirmed. A new crew is on their way. Good, Devon replied. Then, raising his voice to address the cabin again, I founded this airline 20 years ago with a promise. Everyone who steps aboard our planes would be treated with dignity and respect. Today, we failed to honor that promise to my own son. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the cabin. This incident reflects a deeper problem, Devon continued, his voice resolute. One that exists not just in aviation but throughout our society. When my son, an honor student accepted to Stanford, can't sit in a seat he rightfully purchased without being profiled, assaulted, and humiliated, we have serious work to do. Do you think the crew deserves to be fired immediately, or should there be an investigation first? Comment number 1 if you believe immediate termination is justified, or number 2 if you think a proper investigation should happen before any decisions are made. Hit the like button if you believe more CEOs should take direct action against discrimination in their companies. Would you have the courage to speak up like Michael did if you witnessed something similar? The consequences of this incident are about to spread far beyond this single flight. 40 minutes after Devon Washington's arrival, Flight 1422 prepared for its second attempt at departure. The original crew, Nancy, Thomas, and 2 other flight attendants, had been escorted from the aircraft and replaced with a new team. The atmosphere in the cabin had transformed from tense to subdued, passengers processing the dramatic confrontation they had just witnessed. Devon stood at the front of the first-class cabin, addressing the passengers one final time before disembarking with Jamal. The new crew will take excellent care of you for the remainder of your journey to San Francisco. Our ground team in San Francisco will have vouchers and refund information ready when you land. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the faces before him. Today, you witnessed something that happens far too often in our society, just rarely with immediate consequences. Brandon Caldwell shifted uncomfortably in his seat, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. The Henderson sat rigid, Mrs. Henderson dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, whether from genuine remorse or self-pity was unclear. What happened to my son could have happened to anyone's child, Devon continued. But we all know it's more likely to happen to children who look like mine. Today, I was able to intervene because of my position. Most parents don't have that privilege. Michael Chin stood up. Mr. Washington, I'd like to offer my expertise. My company specializes in AI technology that could help identify patterns of discriminatory behavior in customer service interactions. We'd be honored to partner with Liberty Atlantic on addressing these systemic issues. Devin nodded appreciatively. I'll have my team contact you next week, Mr. Chen. Thank you. As father and son prepared to leave the aircraft, Mrs. Henderson suddenly rose from her seat. Wait, she called, her voice quavering. I want to apologize to the young man. Jamal turned, his expression guarded. I lied, she admitted, tears now flowing freely. You never made any threatening gestures. I was afraid, but not because of anything you did. Because of my own prejudices. She looked down, unable to meet his eyes. I'm truly sorry. Jamal nodded solemnly. Thank you for your honesty, ma'am. Mr. Henderson remained seated, his face flushed with embarrassment or anger, perhaps both. Brandon Caldwell made no such apology, instead busying himself with his phone, pretending to be oblivious to the unfolding scene. As Devin and Jamal exited the aircraft, Jamal turned to his father. What happens now? Now, Devin replied, guiding his son toward the terminal, we deal with the aftermath. The aftermath came swiftly. By the time they reached the private Liberty Atlantic lounge, cell phone videos of Jamal's removal and Devin's confrontation with the crew had already begun circulating on social media. The hashtag Justice for Jamal was trending, along with hashtag FlyingWhileBlack. Inside the lounge, a medical professional properly cleaned and stitched Jamal's forehead wound while Devin fielded urgent calls from company executives. Yes, I want Nancy Miller, Thomas Peterson, and security officer James Wilson suspended immediately pending investigation, he instructed the HR director. And I want a complete review of all customer complaints involving racial issues from the past 5 years on my desk tomorrow. As Devin ended the call, the door opened to admit Linda Patterson accompanied by Alan Brooks, Liberty Atlantic's head of security. We've identified the security officer who assaulted Jamal, Alan reported. He's been suspended pending investigation. Airport management is cooperating fully. And the passengers? Devin asked. Michael Chen has provided his full video and statement, Linda replied. 3 other passengers have also come forward with footage and testimony supporting Jamal's account. The Hendersons have requested a private meeting with you. Denied, Devin said flatly. They can speak to our legal team. Jamal, now patched up and changing into a fresh Liberty Atlantic branded sweatshirt, his hoodie having been ruined, looked up. What about that man, Brandon Caldwell? He was the one who said I needed to know my place. Linda consulted her tablet. Brandon Caldwell, frequent first-class passenger, works as vice president of sales at Pinnacle Financial. We've already received calls from their PR department trying to get ahead of this. I imagine they are, Devin said grimly. His behavior will be very interesting to their diverse client base. By evening, the incident had exploded across national news. Cell phone footage from multiple angles showed Jamal's violent removal, the blood streaming down his face, and his father's confrontation with the crew. News vans gathered outside Liberty Atlantic headquarters in downtown Atlanta, while social media continued to amplify the story. CNN breaking news, Black teen assaulted on flight, CEO father grounds plane, MSNBC. Liberty Atlantic at center of racial profiling controversy, Fox News, airline CEO intervenes after son removed from first class, Liberty Atlantic stock took an immediate hit, dropping 7% in after-hours trading. Board members began calling Devin, concerned about the financial implications. The stock will recover, Devin assured the board chair during a tense call. Our integrity as a company wouldn't if we tried to sweep this under the rug. Meanwhile, competing narratives began emerging. Brandon Caldwell gave an interview to a sympathetic business publication, claiming he had been misunderstood and that he felt genuine concern about disruptive behavior that threatened flight safety. The Hendersons released a statement through their attorney, walking back Mrs. Henderson's on-board apology, the Hendersons were responding to concerning behavior they observed. They regret any misunderstanding but were acting out of an abundance of caution in the confined space of an aircraft. Michael Chin countered these narratives forcefully, organizing a joint statement from 7 first-class passengers who had witnessed the incident. What we observed was textbook racial profiling and discrimination, followed by excessive force against a minor who had done nothing wrong. Any claims to the contrary are fabrications designed to protect the perpetrators. At Liberty Atlantic headquarters, the crisis management team worked through the night. Devin insisted on a response that acknowledged the reality of the situation rather than minimizing it. This will be a turning point for our company, he told his executive team. We either confront the ugly truth that this kind of discrimination exists in our organization, or we become complicit in perpetuating it. Not everyone agreed with this approach. Several board members argued for a more cautious response that would protect the company's stock price and reputation. With all due respect, countered the Chief Diversity Officer, Amara Jackson, our reputation will suffer far more if we try to downplay what clearly happened. The videos don't lie. This is an opportunity to lead the industry in addressing a problem that affects every airline. Devin nodded. Amara's right. Draft a statement acknowledging that racial profiling occurred, that it's unacceptable, and outlining specific steps we're taking to address it. He paused. And add that Nancy Miller, Thomas Peterson, and Security Officer James Wilson have been terminated, effective immediately. Without a full investigation, asked Roger Thompson, the CFO, looking concerned. The videos are the investigation, Devin replied firmly. We have multiple angles showing excessive force against a minor who had a valid ticket and was doing nothing wrong. We have audio of crew members saying he doesn't belong in first class. What more do you need? No one had an answer to that. Back at the Washington home that evening, Jamal sat in the family room with an ice pack against his stitched forehead. The events of the day had left him physically and emotionally drained. You still want to visit Stanford? Devin asked, sitting beside his son. Definitely, Jamal replied without hesitation. I'm not letting what happened today derail my future. Devin smiled proudly. That's my boy. But Dad, Jamal added, I want to use what happened to make a difference somehow. Devin nodded thoughtfully. I think we both will. By the following morning, the story had exploded. Flying while black dominated news cycles, with Jamal's bloodied face appearing on every major network. Liberty Atlantic's initial statement acknowledging the racial profiling and announcing the terminations went viral, drawing both praise for its transparency and criticism from those who felt it admitted too much liability. Outside their Atlanta home, news vans lined the street. Reporters shouted questions as Devin escorted Jamal to the waiting company car, the teenager's stitched forehead partially hidden beneath a Stanford University cap. Jamal. How are you feeling about what happened? Mr. Washington. Will you be filing a lawsuit against the fired employees? Is this incident indicative of larger problems at Liberty Atlantic? Devin raised a hand, silencing the barrage. My son and I will be making a statement later today. For now, we ask for privacy as he recovers from his injuries. At Liberty Atlantic headquarters, the crisis had triggered the largest all-hands meeting in company history. Employees packed the auditorium, while thousands more joined virtually from airports and offices around the country. Yesterday, Devin began, standing before his workforce, a Liberty Atlantic passenger was profiled, assaulted, and humiliated because of the color of his skin. That passenger happened to be my son, which means this incident received immediate attention and consequences. But I keep asking myself, how many similar incidents have occurred without a CEO father to intervene? The auditorium fell silent. The uncomfortable truth is that what happened to Jamal reflects biases that exist throughout our society, biases that can manifest in how we treat our passengers, our colleagues, and each other. Devin paced slowly across the stage. I take full responsibility as CEO. The culture of an organization starts at the top, and clearly, I have failed to create an environment where such behavior is unthinkable. On screens throughout the auditorium, slides appeared showing new initiatives, mandatory anti-bias training for all customer-facing staff, revised security protocols requiring supervisor approval for passenger removals, an anonymous reporting system for employees to flag discriminatory behavior, and a passenger Bill of Rights to be prominently displayed at all Liberty Atlantic gates. These are just first steps, Devon emphasized. The real change must come in how we see each other, in the assumptions we make, and in the courage to speak up when we witness injustice. Meanwhile, the terminated employees were telling their side of the story. Nancy Miller appeared on a conservative morning show, tearfully claiming she had been made a scapegoat for political correctness. "I was just following protocol for disruptive passengers," she insisted. This had nothing to do with race. The host nodded sympathetically. "So you're saying you would have treated any passenger the same way?" "Absolutely," Nancy replied. "Safety is always our primary concern." Footage from Jamal's removal played alongside her interview, the stark contrast between her claims and the visual evidence apparent to viewers. Thomas Peterson took a different approach, releasing a written statement through his attorney expressing deep regret for the miscommunication that led to this unfortunate incident, while stopping short of admitting any wrongdoing or bias. Security Officer James Wilson remained silent on advice from his lawyer, but the airport authority had already distanced itself, stating that his actions did not align with our training or protocols for passenger management. The most dramatic media moment came when Brandon Caldwell's employer, Pinnacle Financial, announced his voluntary resignation following an internal review of the incident. The company's statement emphasized its commitment to diversity and inclusion, implicitly acknowledging that Caldwell's recorded comments had made his position untenable. Social media continued to amplify the story, with the hashtag Justice for Jamal generating millions of interactions. Videos of the incident were analyzed frame by frame, with commentators pointing out the stark differences in how Jamal was treated compared to other passengers. Celebrity influencers weighed in, many sharing their own experiences of discrimination while traveling. A famous basketball player tweeted, "What happened to Jamal Washington is why I charter private jets now. Tired of being treated like I don't belong in first class despite paying the same as everyone else." Liberty Atlantic stock continued to fall, down 12% by midday. Financial analysts debated whether the company could weather the storm. This could be an extinction-level event for Liberty Atlantic, one CNBC commentator suggested. "The footage is just too damning." Or, countered another analyst, this could position them as leaders in addressing a problem that exists industry-wide. If Washington handles this right, Liberty could emerge stronger. In the midst of the media frenzy, Michael Chen published a powerful op-ed in the New York Times, detailing his eyewitness account and connecting it to broader patterns of discrimination. What I witnessed wasn't just one bad flight attendant or one overzealous security officer. It was the culmination of a society that teaches us to view young black men as inherently suspicious, regardless of their achievements or behavior. Jamal Washington is a brilliant young innovator whose app has helped thousands of colorblind individuals navigate the world more easily. Yet in that first-class cabin, all some people saw was a threat. The op-ed went viral, generating its own news cycle and amplifying calls for the airline industry to address systemic discrimination. At the Washington home, Jamal struggled with his sudden fame. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends, classmates, and strangers who had seen his story. Many shared support, but others questioned his version of events or even sent threats. "This is a lot," he admitted to his father over dinner. "Everyone's seeing me as either a victim or some kind of symbol. But I'm still just me." Devon nodded understanding. Fame, especially this kind, is a double-edged sword. But you're handling it with more grace than most adults would. "I keep thinking about all the people this happens to who don't have a CEO dad," Jamal said quietly. "What happens to them?" "That's the question that keeps me up at night," Devon replied. "And it's why we can't let this just be about you or me or even Liberty Atlantic. It has to be about changing the system. Later that evening, Devon received a call from the board chair. "The board is concerned about the company's direction," the chair began cautiously. "Some members feel your personal connection to this incident is clouding your judgment." "My personal connection is precisely why I understand the stakes," Devon replied firmly. "Liberty Atlantic will either lead on this issue or become a case study in what not to do. The stock is down 15%, Devon. And it will recover when we demonstrate that we're building a better airline, one where every passenger is treated with dignity, regardless of how they look." There was a long silence before the chair spoke again. "You have the board's support, for now. Don't make us regret it." As Devon ended the call, he found Jamal standing in the doorway of his home office. "They want you to back down, don't they?" Jamal asked perceptively. Devon nodded. "Some do. They're worried about the stock price, liability, the usual corporate concerns." "And what are you worried about?" Devon considered the question carefully. "I'm worried that if we don't use this moment to create real change, we're just setting up the next kid for the same experience. And that kid might not be as resilient as you, or have the resources we have." Jamal nodded thoughtfully. "So what's our next move?" Devon smiled at his son's use of "our." Despite everything, Jamal was still thinking beyond himself. "Our next move," Devon replied, "is to transform a painful incident into a catalyst for change." 3 months later, Jamal Washington stood beneath a sprawling oak tree on Stanford University's campus, surrounded by fellow freshmen during orientation week. The small scar on his forehead had faded considerably, though it would likely remain a permanent reminder of that day on Flight 1422. "Aren't you the guy from that airline video?" asked a blonde girl who had just introduced herself as Emma. Jamal nodded, having grown accustomed to the recognition. "Yeah, that was me. My dad's a pilot for American," Emma continued. "He said what happened to you changed training protocols across the industry. That's pretty amazing." Before Jamal could respond, his phone buzzed with a text from his father, "Big announcement today. Turn on CNBC at 2 p.m. Across the country at Liberty Atlantic headquarters in Atlanta, Devon Washington stood before a packed press conference. The company's stock had recovered most of its losses over the past quarter, bolstered by bold new initiatives that had earned praise from industry watchdogs and civil rights organizations alike. Today, Liberty Atlantic is proud to announce the launch of the Jamal Washington Scholarship for Excellence in Aviation, Devon stated, cameras flashing before him. This program will provide full college funding and guaranteed internships to 50 minority students annually who wish to pursue careers in aviation, from pilots to engineers to executives. The announcement represented just one facet of Liberty Atlantic's comprehensive response to the incident. In the months following Jamal's removal, the company had implemented the most sweeping diversity and anti-bias training program in the industry. Every employee, from baggage handlers to board members, underwent mandatory training designed by leading experts in the field. Nancy Miller, Thomas Peterson, and security officer James Wilson had not only lost their jobs but were facing civil charges for assault and battery in Jamal's case. Their terminations had sent a clear message throughout the company: discriminatory behavior would not be tolerated, regardless of seniority or circumstance. Brandon Caldwell had suffered his own consequences. After his voluntary resignation from Pinnacle Financial, he found himself virtually unemployable in the financial sector. The video of his "Know Your Place" comment had become a case study in workplace bias training programs across the country. The Hendersons had issued a more genuine public apology after Mrs. Henderson's initial on-board admission was contradicted by her later statement. The couple had since enrolled in community reconciliation programs in their hometown. For Michael Chen, the incident had solidified his company's focus on developing AI tools to identify patterns of bias in customer service interactions. Liberty Atlantic had become TechFusion's first airline partner, implementing the technology throughout its customer service platforms. "Our algorithm can flag potential bias in real time," Michael explained during a joint presentation with Liberty Atlantic executives. For example, if first-class passengers of color are being asked for ticket verification at significantly higher rates than white passengers, the system alerts management to the pattern. The technology was now being adopted by hotels, restaurants, and retailers seeking to address similar issues in their customer interactions. Back at Stanford, Jamal met with Michael for lunch at a cafe near campus. The tech CEO had become both mentor and friend to the young student over the past months. "How's the computer science program treating you?" Michael asked as they settled at their table. "Challenging in the best way," Jamal replied with a grin. "And the internship offer for next summer. I can't thank you enough." Michael waved away the gratitude. "Your app already proved your talent. What happened on that plane just proved your character." Jamal's phone buzzed with another text from his father, announcement made. "Call when you can. Dad's launching the scholarship program today," Jamal explained to Michael. 50 full rides a year for minority students interested in aviation. Michael nodded approvingly. "Your father's turned a corporate crisis into genuine social impact. That's rare." "He says it's the least he can do," Jamal replied. "He still feels guilty that his position as CEO was the only reason I got justice. That's why the work matters," Michael said. "To create systems where justice doesn't depend on who your parents are." Later that evening, Jamal FaceTimed with his father from his dorm room. "The scholarship announcement is getting fantastic coverage," Devin reported. "Applications are already pouring in." "That's great, Dad," Jamal said sincerely. "I've been thinking about something, though." "What's that?" "Remember how I always wanted to be a pilot when I was little? Before I got into coding?" Devin smiled at the memory. "You had model planes hanging from every inch of your ceiling." "I'm thinking of taking flying lessons," Jamal continued. "Not changing my major or anything, but maybe getting my private pilot's license. After everything that happened. I don't want to let anyone define what spaces I can or can't enter." Pride shone in Devin's eyes. "I think that's a perfect idea." The following weekend, Jamal was invited to address a student organization focused on diversity in STEM fields. Standing before the group of eager faces, he found himself reflecting on the journey of the past few months. 3 months ago, I was just a kid excited to fly first class for the first time," he began. "I never expected to become the face of a movement about dignity and belonging. But that's the thing about discrimination, it doesn't care about your achievements or your character. It only sees what it expects to see." He touched the small scar on his forehead lightly. "This mark will always remind me of one of the worst days of my life. But it also reminds me of what can happen when people refuse to accept injustice as normal." As Jamal continued his speech, across town at San Francisco International Airport, a Liberty Atlantic flight prepared for boarding. The diverse crew had completed the company's new training program. At the gate, a prominently displayed passenger Bill of Rights included explicit language about non-discrimination and the right to equal treatment regardless of race, gender, religion, or appearance. A young black teenager approached the gate for first-class boarding, dressed in casual clothes similar to what Jamal had worn that fateful day. "First time in first class?" the gate agent asked with a genuine smile. "Yes, ma'am," the teen replied. "You're going to love it," she assured him, scanning his boarding pass. "Enjoy your flight." As the teen boarded, he had no idea of the changes that had been implemented to ensure his experience would be fundamentally different from Jamal's. He would never know how close the industry had come to dismissing the incident as an isolated case rather than addressing the systemic issues it revealed. Back at Stanford, Jamal concluded his address to enthusiastic applause. "The work isn't finished," he emphasized to the students. "What happened to me was just one visible instance of something that happens every day in less dramatic ways. The real change happens when we all recognize our responsibility to speak up, like Michael did on that plane, even when it's risky or uncomfortable." Later, Jamal and his father collaborated via video call on reviewing new training materials for Liberty Atlantic crew members. They had developed a unique workshop where Jamal shared his experience directly with employees, humanizing the statistics and policies. "Do you ever wish none of this had happened?" one employee asked during a virtual session. "That you could have just had a normal flight?" Jamal considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But then I think about all the passengers who've written to me sharing similar experiences where nothing changed. If what happened to me means their next flight will be different, then maybe it was worth it." As evening fell on Stanford's campus, Jamal walked back to his dorm beneath a canopy of stars. His phone buzzed with a notification: another Liberty Atlantic flight had completed its journey safely, one of hundreds that would do so that day. For the passengers aboard, it was just a normal trip. But the normalcy itself represented progress. The right of everyone to travel with dignity, regardless of how they looked. The scar on Jamal's forehead would fade further with time, but the impact of what happened that day would continue to ripple outward. One teenager's humiliation had become a catalyst for change, a reminder that justice sometimes requires more than policies and procedures. It requires courage, from those who experience discrimination and those who witness it. And somewhere in the sky above, another first-class cabin carried passengers of all backgrounds, each one belonging exactly where they chose to be. What would you have done if you were on that flight witnessing Jamal's treatment? Would you have spoken up like Michael or remained silent like many other passengers? Let us know in the comments. If this story moved you or made you think differently about discrimination in everyday spaces, please like and subscribe to support more content that shines a light on these important issues. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message, and remember that creating change often starts with one person refusing to accept injustice as normal. Thank you for watching, and remember, everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, no matter where they sit. Jamal's harrowing experience reveals how quickly racial bias can escalate from microaggressions to dangerous physical confrontations. The flight crew's immediate suspicion of a black teen in first class demonstrates how deeply ingrained prejudice can be, even in professional settings. What's particularly striking is how those with authority, Nancy, Thomas, and Officer Wilson, used their power not to protect but to humiliate someone they deemed didn't belong. This story also highlights the profound impact of privilege in determining outcomes. Jamal received justice only because his father possessed extraordinary influence as CEO. For countless others facing similar discrimination, no rescue arrives, no plane is grounded, and no consequences follow for the perpetrators. The contrasting responses from passengers illustrate our collective responsibility. While most remained silent, Michael chose courage over comfort. His willingness to document the truth prevented the incident from being dismissed or rewritten. Perhaps most importantly, this narrative demonstrates the difference between performative responses and genuine transformation. Rather than merely firing individuals or issuing empty apologies, Devon implemented systemic changes through comprehensive training, technological solutions, and educational opportunities. The ultimate lesson is that creating equitable spaces requires both individual courage and institutional accountability. True justice shouldn't depend on having a powerful parent, but on systems that recognize and protect everyone's dignity regardless of appearance. What would you have done if you were on that plane witnessing Jamal's mistreatment? Would you have spoken up like Michael or remained silent like most passengers? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective might help someone find their own courage to stand against discrimination. If Jamal's story touched you or made you think differently about how racial bias operates in everyday spaces, please hit that like button to help this important message reach more people. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that shed light on social justice issues often overlooked in mainstream conversations. Have you or someone you know experienced racial profiling while traveling? Your stories matter and help others understand they're not alone. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message or with those who might not recognize how discrimination happens in real time. Thank you for listening to Jamal's journey. Remember, change begins when we refuse to accept injustice as normal, whether we're experiencing it, witnessing it, or have the power to address it. Together, we can create a world where everyone belongs exactly where they choose to be.